I think what we wanted to do is just give you a little bit of a sense of where the Green Sanctuary is coming from in terms of its origins and what it's for and what we're trying to accomplish. And I'll start with the fact that this is a UUA program. It's been around since 1989, which is fascinating. And I'll just tell you that this is the 7th iteration. And so maybe back then they were looking at the fact that it was environmental degradation that we were worried about, the toxins in our waters, for instance, to keep the theme going. And I think what you'll notice over this next this presentation today is that this particular Green Sanctuary iteration is very focused on climate. Now, that doesn't mean that if you are super focused on plastics and it just drives you nuts, well, you're one of our leaders, you know, and you're going to then help to make that also part of the program. But the way we're going to get accreditation is through focusing on climate urgency. And so to just go on with the UUA for a moment, they are providing a framework. And one of the most helpful frameworks is that they have 1,500 of us on a website where we're exchanging information. So if someone has the best mitigation methodologies that have worked and they've compiled it, they put it on there as a resource. We're also part of a cohort of 6 other UUs. One of them in Ottawa, one of them in North Carolina. They're not exactly like us, but it's nice to come together once a month and talk about where we're stuck or get inspiration. So I think that's really important. I always or we call it, get on the back of others. And I think especially with climate change, we don't need to recreate anything. We just need to put our efforts and our energy forward. So I just will change the slide for a moment. So we will leave this theme, but I will just tell you what they're calling this particular iteration. UUA Green Sanctuary 2030. It was called 2020, but 2020 was such an awful year that they just said, let's use the IPCC 2030 goal. We got 10 years, and I think it's a great idea. Then they got mobilizing for climate justice, and Linda's going to talk about the justice component, a roadmap, and that's what I was just saying, it is a roadmap for congregations to rise to the crisis. So I think it's really in sync with all of us as UUs and with all of us here in this room. And then again, the vision is, and I put in bold, a world that is sustainable and just for humanity and for the whole of the web of life, including present and future generations. Again, very consistent with who we are. Now, this next slide, I'm going to just go in points because these things can get confusing if one doesn't point. This particular iteration has 3 intersectional goals, and that's going to be your mitigation, your adaptation and resilience, and your justice. Now, I'm one of those people that has problems with words. They don't quite compute in my mind. So I'm going to assume that some of you also have that problem. Mitigation is a big word for lessening. And what that means is lessening our fossil fuel usage and greenhouse gases. So that's all that means. The second one, adaptation and resilience, that can be understood in the sense that, let's say with flooding, we didn't really think that flooding was our problem here in New England, but it seems to have been with Ida. So what are the things that we can do? Maybe these rain gardens that build trenches and we put plants in them and the water goes in there rather than going and creating more floods. That's just an example of what adaptation and resilience means. And then the third is the justice component. And this is, I think, the last 5 years in particular, you're going to find organizations all over, not just churches, but philanthropy, which is the field I'm in. It's just, you have to do it. And we're glad about that UUA has responded to that need. And that is where we say, hold on, where are the power plants? Hold on, where is the transportation, highways and such? And we start to work with those communities and those people that have a real interest in making sure that they are not out of the decision making for the future of our infrastructure, for instance. And we work together, and Linda will speak to this more, how we're going to actually invite them to tell us what they want to do. And we'll also be working with the nonprofits that I introduced you to in the beginning that are also working with the justice lens. So altogether, those three goals are going to make our climate change solutions. And we're going to be having to, in the next 3 or 4 years, run 3 campaigns. And the only reason they're called campaigns as opposed to a project is that they're a little more complex. So I'm not sure what the next slide is. Maybe this will speak to it, or maybe it doesn't. No, maybe go back for a moment. I'm going to let Katie go on, but I just want to say that we're going to not use the word much in this presentation, but the word campaign is the word they use. So for instance, our board is very interested in getting this church more sustainable, less greenhouse gases. Again, the word mitigation would be the word we would use. Well, how can we also maybe get people interested that are in this congregation or other congregations too, to learn the steps to make their house more energy efficient and to use the solar and other systems that are available. So we could do that, and then we could also do the justice. There's some amazing programs right now for people that are in the lower income brackets to get their houses energy efficient. And so we can learn about that and then also contribute. So there'll be a lot of dynamic thinking in the next 7 months as the educational committee starts to introduce all the different options we have. And then it'll be you guys, your interest, your talent that will propel us forward to figure out what that campaign is going to be. Okay, so next, Katie is going to talk a little bit about the where we are in the Green Sanctuary process.
Hold on 1 second, Katie. We're unmuting. There you go.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Katie, and I am part of the Green Sanctuary Steering Committee, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be talking to you, though from afar today. But we've been working really hard for a long time to reach this day of the kickoff, and it's exciting that it is here. Thank you so much, Adam and Sabina, for that great introduction and the video and the overview of those goals. I'm going to speak a little bit about our timeline. And where we've been, where we are right now, and where we are going. So here we have basic timeline for our roadmap. You can see that middle stage right now is where we are right now. So going back in time, a little over a year ago, because of COVID, things slowed down just a little bit. We decided, and because of the 2020 visioning process that was done in the church, we decided that the Green Sanctuary would be a wonderful program to be able to achieve those goals that came out of the visioning process. And so stage 1 was team building and our application. You have to apply to be part of the Green Sanctuary program. And we put together our application with some background information about our church, and put together our steering committee to be able to help us get through this process, and we're accepted into the program. And then the first thing you need to do is create a baseline. Where are we right now? So that's stage 2, and the baseline is kind of 2-tiered. One was your classic, like, how much carbon do we produce as a church on an average year? And so getting your carbon footprint baseline, you're looking at your electricity bills and your heating bills and things like that. Because if ultimately we're trying to achieve reductions, we need to know where we started from. But then we also did a baseline assessment of what are the current strengths of our church? Where do we have people with skills that we can draw upon and connections to other organizations, particular passions that we are interested in? What are those opportunities that we can draw upon, those strengths to build upon? You know, what are we already doing well? And then also, where are some opportunities that we can do a little bit better? You know, that there's some room for improvement. So we did individual interviews and questions with individuals in the church, in the administration, in leadership. And then we also did a general survey out to the congregation to get that baseline opportunity assessment. We took the results from that assessment and wrote up a report. And we're documenting everything along the way, submitted that to the UUA, and had some feedback and some back and forth. And then that prepares us to move forward, to build upon those strengths and to then strengthen some of those areas where we were lacking. And that brings us to today. Today is our kickoff. We are taking the information from that opportunity assessment to move forward with this year, which is our stage 3, where we're doing education of ourselves, of our congregation. We're pulling again from the congregation and finding out where people's interests are, where our passions are and our skills, and then creating some action planning, some action plans so that we can prepare for our campaigns, right? We want to be very, very thoughtful about what those campaigns are going to be so that we can have the best impact and the best outcomes going forward. So a little bit later, Ed and Diane are going to talk about that education campaign that will be happening for the next 6 to 7 months. But this is the first day. So we're all going to be doing this together. Sabina spoke about the campaigns, that they are sort of a broad theme, right? So you can think of a campaign as the broad theme or topic that we might want to address. And then within those campaigns will be individual projects. And Sabina used the example of carbon reduction through energy efficiency. So you might, as Sabina said, you might have energy efficiency projects within the church. Also energy efficiency projects at home that our congregation would do. Possibly clean energy production, solar panels, geothermal we'll be looking at. Possible advocacy projects where we're advocating for clean energy, energy efficiency in the broader community, or statewide or nationwide. So there's a ripple effect where you'll see your direct impacts, you and your family, and we'll show this on another line. You'll see that we can make our changes at home, and then those effects will ripple out broader. And then when we talk about sustainability, we talk about things generally within systems. I always love talking about systems and at multi-layers. And there's no one solution to anything. So you're always talking about how can we have the most impact at multiple layers to affect the whole system. Sorry, actually, can you go back a little bit? I was skipping ahead with what I was talking about. We'll get there, but that was just a little preview. All right, so we'll do those 3 campaigns. We'll pick those broad themes, do those 3 campaigns. They don't have to be sequential or concurrent. We can just kind of figure out the best timing for those so we can have the best impact. And then our goal is 2025 to be writing up the results of those campaigns and applying for accreditation from the UUA. All right, now we can go ahead to the next slide. Thanks. All right, so I had skipped ahead a little bit in what I was talking about those systems that we're really embracing the ideology of, well, we're thinking globally, right? Bill Nye said we are one global ecosystem. You heard that in the video. But sometimes that feels really overwhelming, right? How can I how can I change the world? Well, we can if we all work together. And so we're one global ecosystem, but what we can do as individuals is start at home and start within our church and build beyond that to reach out to our communities. We have, as individuals and as our church, we have resources that other people might have access to. We have connections, we have partnerships. And so by working together thoughtfully, methodically, using the resources we have, we absolutely can have a ripple effect out to our community and on those global systems. If you think about, as Sabina said, all the UUA churches participating in Green Sanctuary, our combined impact is quite impressive, and setting an example for everyone that we know as we talk about all the fun things that we're doing, because it will take all of us. You know, it feels overwhelming as an individual, but all of us working together, we can change the world, as Bill Nye says. That is about all I have for the kind of timeline and the structure of the program.
So I want to start with a brief definition of environmental justice that I got from the Climate Action of Princeton University, and then I'll read bits and pieces of it. Environmental justice is a social justice movement that seeks to dismantle the flawed environmental policies that have long harmed low-income communities and communities of color. And instead, what it is attempting to do is to pursue policy and development that work to create sustainable, cooperative, and equitable futures for the environment. And it rests on the principle that everyone, no matter their race, their class, their gender, has a right to a healthy and to a clean environment. So I think some examples and a little bit of history about the environmental justice movement might be helpful. So according to Paula Jones in her chapter on Justice on Earth, and if you're lucky, Reverend Adam will sign his chapter like he did for me last year. He has a chapter in this book and I highly recommend you reading it. But she wrote in her chapter a little bit about the history and said that the seeds of the environmental justice movement were planted in the late 70s when about 30,000 gallons of PCB contaminated oil was illegally dumped on the highways in North Carolina. And so, of course, there was a call to clean it up, and they did. They cleaned it up, and they moved the contaminated soil to a landfill that was in the poorest county in North Carolina, and that was the most heavily populated with African Americans. And there were a series of lawsuits and a series of battles that followed that, and that really started the environmental justice movement. And we know from our own memories, long-term memories, short-term memories, about these kinds of issues that this kind of thing has happened over and over again, whether it's the contaminated lead water in Flint, Michigan, the Love Canal, whether it's where toxic waste plants are placed. They're not in Avon, you know, they're in the inner cities of Hartford and here in our area. Where are food deserts? Where can people get fresh, healthy food? Not in Hartford, you know. So so we see this over and over again. We see, I'll just give you another example that I think is interesting. African Americans are 75% more likely to live in what they call fence-aligned communities, which are communities that have more pollution of one kind or another, whether it's noise pollution, whether it's odor, whether it's traffic, whether it's emissions, and that results in poor air quality. African American children are 7 times more likely to have asthma than white children. So, you know, there are a lot of impacts on marginalized communities related to environmental injustice. Environmental justice begins with the idea that the adverse effects of environmental injustice are not felt equitably among people. I mean, we all feel the effects of environmental injustice, there's no doubt about it, but we don't feel them as strongly as people in marginalized communities. So who are the people who are most affected? They're people who are in historically oppressed populations. They are also the people who are least responsible for those. So people, for example, in developing countries, people, indigenous people who live in areas where they're not doing a lot of toxic polluting, right? So they are the people that are most affected. The other demographic is the people who have the fewest resources to combat this. And the other demographic, and this is all according to the UUA, is the future generations. So what can we do about this? I refer you back to Reverend Adams' reference to the vision statement, which I'll read it again because it's really important. We are a church that actively serves the community and works for a just society in partnership with those affected by injustice. So how will this look? How can we do this? Our goal is going to be to partner with communities in the greater Hartford area and to help to understand what they need. Our goal is really not to go into these communities and to say to them, we need to remove this, we need to put this in, we need to change this. Our goal is to have dialogue with them and to get from them what they want to do. So we're hoping, especially because we've just partnered with GIA, which is the Greater Hartford Interfaith Action Alliance, that we'll be having conversations with people in our community, with people in GIA, and we will ultimately be communicating to GIA what we're learning, you know, what kinds of concerns we have, and people in marginalized communities have, I mean, more importantly, like I said. And one of the most important things I think too is that we need to get people here to help. You know, we're all working on this together. This is really the beginning of this, I think, wonderful movement. And there will be opportunities for you to volunteer. There will be opportunities for you to engage in conversation with all of us, and we hope that you take advantage of those. And that will be the kind of beginning of what we'll be doing.